Welcome back to the Rum Ration Podcast. I'm Colin, and as always, I'm joined by my old, and I like to emphasize that, old RMR comrade in arms, Rejoy.
Well, I did shave off the beard.
You did.
Now,
The Admiral's disgusted.
Back to the young me. I'm Rejoy, and today we're talking about a subject that sounds almost like adventure fiction at first. Women who disguise themselves as men to serve as soldiers or sailors.
And Rejoy, thinking back to our time in the infantry, there's a specific kind of bond you only get when you're cold, tired, wet, miserable, also hot, tired, dusty, miserable, and relying on the person next to you to do their job.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you go shopping at Costco on one of those holiday weekends.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that sense of shared endurance. But the wonderful military cocktail of bad weather, worse food, sore feet, and the knowledge that if things go wrong, well, it's the person beside you that matters more than almost anyone else in the world.
That's right. And that's kind of why I think today's topic is so fascinating, because we're talking about people who had to endure all of that while also carrying a secret that could have ended their careers, their reputations, and in some circumstances, possibly even their lives.
Well, yeah. We're looking at women who went to war as men, not just women who supported armies, not just women who served around armies, but women who put on men's clothing, used men's names, and pretend to be something they weren't, entered worlds that were officially close to them.
For centuries, the military and the sea were seen strictly as male domains. I mean, it was actually considered bad luck to bring a woman on board a ship, right? Yeah, and the Army, the Navy, the mess deck, the barrack room, the campaign trail, all of it was wrapped up in ideas of masculinity, endurance, authority, and physical toughness, which is what I think of when I think of Rejoy.
Well, I am the epitome of that, Colin.
You are, absolutely.
Yeah, excelled in that. And yet the historical record keeps coughing up these incredible stories of ordinary women who stepped into that supposedly male world centuries ago. And you know what? They did the job.
That's the key phrase for this episode. They did the job.
Exactly. We're not treating them as curiosities or costumes. These were people who marched, sailed, carried weapons, nursed the wounded, rode horses, climbed rigging, endured disease, and survived under the same miserable conditions as the men around them and as what you alluded to earlier on in the podcast.
That's right. And just to try and keep one narrative thread going, our focal point for the episode is a woman called Sarah Emma Edmonds, a Canadian-born woman from New Brunswick who served during the American Civil War under the name Franklin Thompson.
But we'll also be looking at names like Cathay Williams, who served as William Cathay.
Pretty clever, that one.
Oh,
no one will figure that one out. My name is Chatterjee Rejoy. Not that Rejoy Chatterjee fellow.
I'm pretty sure she was a McGill graduate right there. William Brown, who served in the Royal Navy. Christian Davies, known as Mother Ross. Nadezhda Durova, who served as Alexander Jurov. And others whose stories stretch across, war, sea, empire, race, class, and, of course, gender.
Yeah, so Cathay Williams there and Nadezhda Durova, who's dropping the A from Durova to Durova. They weren't trying too hard to disguise themselves.
They're very military. We're not talking like high smarts. We're talking about getting the job done.
That's right. It's all about the job. And we'll also touch on the legendary side of this, because stories like Mulan show that the idea of a woman entering war under a male identity it's a very old one. But we'll be careful there, because some of these stories are documented and some are memoir driven, some are contested, and some are legendary. And our unofficial motto, of course, the Rum Ration Podcast is never let facts get in the way of ruining a good story. So we'll try and tell you where we know that there's actual facts backing things up and where some of it's just kind of legend.
Yeah, and we'll let you sort of take those decisions for yourself, because that means, as always, when something's uncertain, we'll say so. Yeah, we don't go around making things up just because it sounds good.
No, we're not a politician.
No, we're not. Now, this is not a political podcast.
Right. I think we've gone like 2 or 3 episodes. We hadn't had to remind each other that. We've been making such good progress.
Oh, we should do another one based on this is not a political podcast. Oh dear. But making things up, it's not uncommon.
No.
Is it?
No, but even though making things up because it sounds good has powered many a mess dinner story.
Oh, goodness me, yes. Because, when I made, as I was saying at the last mess dinner, when I made the rank of Major General,
Yes.
it was while I was deployed in Afghanistan.
Naturally.
It was that one man, and my VC, which is still pending.
That's the second application you put in.
I put in
Sam Hughes.
I put in, yes. He is my icon.
Sponsor.
So, it's powered, as you said, many a mess dinner story and possibly a few official stories as well.
A few official histories, allegedly.
Yeah, but the real theme today, before we get diverted, is the gap between comrades and the system. How were these women treated by the people who served beside them? How were they treated once the military machine discovered they weren't supposed to be there?
Yeah, because those are often two very different things.
Yeah, in the field, the person next to you is judged by whether they can endure, whether they can be trusted, whether they pull their weight, but the system judges by categories.
Name, rank, sex, unit, papers, muster roll, medical exam.
Yeah, and these women were forced the system into a very uncomfortable question. If someone can do the job, well, what exactly is the problem?
So today's episode is called Hidden in the Ranks, Women Who Went to War as Men.
Ooh, snappy title, Colin. Snappy title. And before we get to Sarah Emma Edmonds, we should probably set the stage. So tell us, what kind of world were these women entering?
Think about the physical reality of military and naval life in these periods. We've both done field exercises, done our fair share of Gagetown, and lived through the usual joys of cold weather and hot weather and wet socks and no sleep and questionable ration choices.
I have particular fond memories of, ham lunglet, which I don't know if it's still in the system today, but if it is,
no.
Sadly not. Sadly not.
Yes.
Learn to love that at the end of the day. Yet even that doesn't come close to comparing with the worlds that we're talking about today. The Age of Sail, 18th century campaigning, the American Civil War, the Russian cavalry, and the British Army of earlier centuries.
Yeah, those were worlds of brutal physical labor, marching for days, sleeping rough with no canvas above you, maybe a blanket if you're lucky, disease everywhere, wounds treated with mostly prayer and hope. And the hope is that your medical officer, if there was one, wasn't too drunk. And in the Navy, it was hauling ropes, like heavy wooden or sodden ropes, climbing rigging on ships that were dashing through the open seas and swinging wildly everywhere, setting sails, working in storms, and living with basically almost no privacy whatsoever. And this is a part that I always found mind-boggling, is how these women could remain, quote, hidden.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, when you're injured, you're hoping that your medical officer isn't too drunk, and you're hoping that you actually are.
Oh, exactly.
But
save a little for me.
Yeah, isn't that mine actually? I don't want to feel the saw. So privacy issue is huge, though. The privacy issue was a really, really big thing. In the modern military, privacy is limited enough, as we know. But in those earlier armies and ships, it could be almost, non-existent. You ate together, you slept together, you washed when you could, stank together, got sick together. Very little control over your own body once the institution had you.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Which makes the disguise even more astonishing. It wasn't just putting on a jacket and choosing a name. It was maintaining that identity day after day under constant scrutiny, like casual observation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the social context was just as heavy as the physical one. So Cathay Williams, she of the very clever name, for example, was born into slavery. After the Civil War began, following the Union occupation of Jefferson City, Missouri in 1861, Williams was designated as, quote, contraband, unquote, which is a whole different podcast in its own right. And she worked as an army cook and a washerwoman. In this support role, she accompanied the infantry across the country, served under General Philip Sheridan, and witnessed major military actions, including the Red River Campaign and the Battle of Pea Ridge.
Astonishingly, her actual enlistment as a soldier occurred after the Civil War ended. On November 15th, 1866, she joined the U.S. Regular Army under the pseudonym William Cathay. During this tenure, she became the only woman documented to serve as a Buffalo soldier. Now, Rejoy, some of our listeners may not even know what a buffalo soldier was. Are you able to explain?
Yeah, we're not talking about the Bob Marley song here,
No.
although it's derived from that, actually.
Correct,
know.
No. Now I can't get that out of my head. Thank you.
I know it's going around. It just struck me when I saw, in your notes the term. So buffalo soldiers were black regular army regiments created in the United States after the Civil War.
So these were segregated units?
Yeah, they were segregated units. And, here you have black soldiers serving in a country that had only just abolished slavery and in an army that still carried all the racism of the society around it.
And they served mostly out west, right?
Yeah, out on the western frontier. You're talking about remote posts, long marches, rough conditions, poor supplies, if they got supplies at all. Sometimes there's stories of that. All of a sudden the logistics officer would say, oh, that wagon load that you were supposed to get, well, you know what? It went missing when it was actually just sitting in the fort. Disease, brutal heat, cold. It was rough and very hard soldiering.
But they were surrounded by a warm and welcoming community of Indigenous people who were so happy to share the land with them, right? Or am I misreading that?
They're made very welcome.
It's very confusing when you're reading some of the official 250th anniversary stuff that's going on right now. It's like,
yes, that's a different highway.
So Cathay Williams, she wasn't just sneaking into any army job. She was entering one of the toughest corners of the post-war regular army.
Yeah, that's right. And that really is the remarkable part. She was born enslaved, had already worked for the Union Army as a cook and a laundress, and then somehow enlisted using a very clever alias, William Cathay, in the 38th U.S. Infantry.
So due to lax enrollment standards and the lack of a thorough medical examination, clearly didn't go too far. She crossed every barrier at once.
Well, I suppose also if you look back at the time, the Civil War had just ended. They want bodies. They want to fill out, they want to now go and expand out west. They need soldiers to do that. So you've got a black in a racist army, formerly enslaved in a country still reeling from slavery. And let's not forget, even though the North fought, one of the reasons was to abolish slavery, it didn't mean they weren't racist. There was a lot of racism in northern armies. And a woman in a military system that didn't allow women to serve as soldiers. So she's basically got everything against her.
And yet she got in.
And more importantly, she endured. She endured that hard soldiering that we just talked about. The marches, the illness, the heat, the discipline, the welcoming people.
Welcoming local communities.
Bake sales were held, except, well, we won't get into the goods. She was only discovered after multiple years of campaigning put her in the hospital, and finally a proper medical exam, found the truth.
So the story isn't just that she fooled the system.
No, the story is that once she was inside it, she did the job, and she was respected by her comrades. And that's a reminder that, quote, ordinary, unquote, for some of these women already meant a level of hardship that we can barely wrap our heads around. They were already surviving systems of labor, violence, exclusion, and dependency before they ever even put on a uniform.
Yeah, I mean, basic life back then was hard enough from a physical point of view. I mean, if you wanted to do a reenactment per se, and say you were, my friend Paola, who sometimes listens to this, and she wanted to go to Upper Canada Village to get a taste for this on her way back to Toronto, she could do that because this is set in the 1860s, just like Upper Canada Village. Yeah,
and the beauty is, though, once you finish the reenactment, you can go back to the comforts of 21st century life.
Not back to your post on sentry duty. Well, Sarah Emma Edmonds also had a hard early life. She was Canadian, born in New Brunswick, on a hard scrabble, shitty-ass little farm. And the story that we have is she fled to Michigan to escape an abusive father and a forced marriage. Now, Michigan's a long way away from New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Probably didn't catch a Porter flight or...
I'm guessing Porter wasn't servicing that area at that point in time.
Right. And didn't have direct flights, that's for sure.
Well, then it was Air Canada. It was going to be way too expensive.
Now, we might get a sponsor. You never know.
Oh, wonderful flights.
My favorite.
Very affordable.
And both of you guys fly out of Billy Bishop Airport. By the way, we have an episode on Billy Bishop.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, according to the story of Sarah Edmonds, she found that life was easier and safer if she dressed as a man.
Which I get.
Yeah, especially doing what she was doing, like just getting out of there.
It ain't easy nowadays being a woman, let alone back then.
That's right. That's right. And as you said, traveling from New Brunswick to Michigan, that's quite a ways. You're not going by rail or maybe she did. I don't know. But, no flights or cars or anything like that. So before she became Franklin Thompson, the soldier, disguise for her had already become a survival tool. So she was well inured to presenting herself as a man.
Right. That's important because we shouldn't reduce this to adventure. For some, disguise was a route into war. For others, it was a route out of danger.
Yeah.
Poverty, control, or restricted opportunity, a desperate attempt to live a better life. And I guess sometimes it was jumping from the proverbial frying pan into the fire, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so. I'd agree with you on that one. Because then there's William Brown in the Royal Navy.
That's incredible.
This is an incredible story indeed. Brown served aboard the HMS Queen Charlotte, and the sources describe Brown as a black woman from Grenada who served under a male name, which is interesting.
It is interesting, and because I'm annoying, I like to name drop places. I've been to Grenada several times. My grandparents lived in Grenada.
I remember that. You have fond memories of 1981 or 82, was it? When
yeah, I wasn't there for the invasion, but my grandparents were. They said the Rangers were very polite young men. My grandmother was very impressed, and she went and gave him some lime juice. One of the striking claims is that Brown rose to the role of captain of the foretop, leading sailors working high in the rigging.
So, captain of the foretop. Now, this is not a ceremonial title, is it? No, not some mess elite dinner accolade. This is
no.
This
That's
is
the
something
elite of the elite.
Yeah, it's physical, dangerous, skilled work. You're handling sails, ropes, wind, height, weather. Remember the ships of the day at that time. I mean, you've got those high rigging. So captain of the foretop is climbing all the way to the top,
right,
to take care of business up there. And so the men who need to trust you know that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's not the kind of job you fake for long. You have to be seriously respected by your peers and your superiors.
Yeah, exactly. That is one of the things we keep coming back to. You might fool a clerk. You might fool a recruiting sergeant. You do not fool a storm, a march, a horse, especially not a horse.
No. Very clever.
No, muskets too, a fever, or a sail in bad weather.
Yeah. Which leads us to the first real question. What pushes someone to cross that line? What's the catalyst?
So what's the spark? What makes someone decide to cross that particular line and enter the military or maritime world under another name?
First thing to say is that from our research, there's no single answer. These women they didn't do it all for the same reason.
No, exactly. For Sarah Emma Edmonds, at least according to the story that we have, it begins with survival, which you had alluded to earlier on. She fled from an abusive father and a forced marriage, and life as a man offered the level of safety and mobility that life as a woman simply did not back in those days. And
then the American Civil War breaks out, and Franklin Thompson becomes not just a disguise, but a military identity.
A remarkable transition. What begins as personal survival suddenly becomes, wartime service.
And then you have someone like Christian Davies, known as Mother Ross. She joined the British Army in 1693 under a male identity. And the story is that she did this to find her lost husband, Richard Welsh, who had been sent to the army in Flanders.
Now, this is a love story. Netflix, are you listening? We'll happily license you this episode.
Yes.
For, we'll talk about that after. Because that's a hell of a recruitment story. Why did you join? Well, not exactly for king and country. I'm looking for my husband.
That would certainly make for an interesting recruiting poster.
Join the army. Your spouse may already be there.
Wait, I was trying to get away from it.
Wrong person.
Probably not the one the adjutant would approve.
No, but it tells us something powerful. In Christian Davies' case, the catalyst was personal. War had swallowed someone she loved, and the only way to follow him was to enter the war herself. Now, we know about camp followers in those times.
Yes.
I mean, they were quite common.
Yes.
She didn't go as a camp follower.
No.
She went as a soldier.
On the march, carrying everything, doing her stuff.
Completely different.
How come she didn't just like send an SMS message or an email to her husband to try and find him at the time? Maybe you could have turned on Find My Phone.
Yeah, or look on Facebook or send out Instagram post, you know, hey, Rick, here I am.
Then, of course, we have the legendary angle with Mulan. The Ballad of Mulan tells us her father was called up by the Khan. He had no grown son, and Mulan had no elder brother. So she bought a horse and saddle to serve in his place.
Man, when that summons came around, she must have been cursing. But anyway, fighting the Huns was no happy thing to do in those days. So, but we need to be clear. Mulan belongs to legend and literary tradition, not confirmed military record.
You're right. We should not treat Mulan as a documented person in the same category as Edmonds or Cathay Williams. But we also don't like to let too many facts get in the way of a good story.
No, of course not. And the story matters here because it expresses a powerful cultural idea, family duty. A daughter steps into the role expected of a son because the family has no other option. And Mushu, the family ancestor dragon, voiced by Eddie Murphy in the animated film, also played a big part. But that's a tale for another day.
You have a soft spot for Mushu, don't you?
I do have a soft spot for Mushu.
Yes. In that sense, Mulan's story gives us one of the oldest and most enduring versions of the theme, disguise as sacrifice.
Not as trickery. Let's be very clear about that. Not as vanity, especially not as vanity. I mean, the conditions. No place for nail polish or mascara or anything like that. This was disguised as duty.
And that's an important distinction.
Very important. Because if we only treat these stories as deception, we miss the human motivation underneath.
Survival, love, family, opportunity, service, patriotism, escape.
And sometimes all of those things mixed together.
Which brings us to another kind of catalyst, professional ambition. Some of these stories begin with the fact that a person just wants access to a life, a profession, or a role that society simply refuses to allow.
Yeah, that's right. Because back in those days, there were so many avenues that were closed to women. James Barrie is one of the strongest examples of that. Barrie was born around 1795 as Margaret Ann Bulkley and lived adult life as a man. The plan, as we have it, was to study medicine in Edinburgh, disguised as a man, and then move to Venezuela, of all places, and practice as a woman once the country was liberated. Good plan. Good plan.
Well, it's a plan.
It's a plan.
It's a plan. But the liberation in Venezuela failed, and Barrie remained in the male identity. But
damn your eyes.
Instead of giving up, this is wild, Barrie joined the British Army as a medical officer, serving around the world from South Africa to the Caribbean before eventually ending up in Canada, where she ended her or his career as the Inspector General of Military Hospitals. Like, holy fuck.
Which is incredible. And it goes back to your point earlier on. They can do the job.
Yes, very well so.
And then she went right to the top, or they went right to the top.
A little ornery too, I think, which we'll get to.
Well,
probably didn't like people asking too many questions.
No. Well, we're a little ornery now too. So
yes, that's true.
Which means the disguise began as a route to education and became the foundation for a lifelong military medical career.
Yeah, we do not know from the script sources alone whether Barrie ever intended to remain in the military long term, or whether the uniform just became the most effective shield for a medical career, which would have been equally unavailable to a civilian female at the time.
Now, I know that the editing process cancels out Newton, my contrarian cat.
Yes.
But he's just weighed in on it, and he believes that she meant to remain in the medical field as a profession, as a man.
Oh, yes?
That is his official take on it.
Well, if Newton says it, it's got to be true.
It's true. So we'll just go with that. Yes, we'll go with that. Thank you. But what we can say is that Barrie became a senior British medical officer and made it to retirement without the secret being publicly exposed.
It's wild. Like a full career. It wasn't like, did it for a few years and then got exposed. A full career.
Oops, yep. You got me.
30, 40 years of that. It's wild. This is extraordinary. Not just getting in, staying in, advancing, becoming part of the system that would have never, ever admitted the person openly.
And getting right to the top of a field.
Yeah.
And that is the contradiction. The system could accept Barrie's skill, authority, and work, so long as the system believed Barry was a man.
Right. And then there's Nadezhda. Am I saying that right? Nadezhda?
I think so.
Nadezhda Durova, who served as Alexander Durov. She probably changed her name because she knew that, and eventually in a podcast far in the future, there'd be people stumbling over these names and making it easier for us to pronounce.
Not just people, the two of us.
The two of us, indeed.
Yes.
She served in the Russian cavalry during the Napoleonic period.
Yeah. I mean, in mentioning the name, I know that I think Russian and in Russian and the Ukraine languages, the addition of the A denotes a female. So Durova automatically would then trigger up, oh, you're a female, regardless of how you presented yourself. So Durov then is the male version of it. So Durova is fascinating because the source set tells us that after discovery, well, guess what? She was allowed to continue serving.
That's
so
wild.
she must have been quite incredible as a cavalry soldier.
Seriously. And that's because that wasn't the usual pattern, right? Most often discovery ends a career and they get tossed out in disgrace. But in Durova's case, the military identity continues.
Yeah, that tells us that the system could be rigid, but not always in the same way. Circumstances mattered. Patronage mattered, and that survived in all forms for a long time. Reputation mattered, but competence mattered.
Right. You were saying at the beginning of the podcast all about getting the job done.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing that probably mattered was the fact that they had the Napoleonic army to fight and defeat because he had invaded Russia.
And Moscow had been burnt down.
There is that part too, which I think she was part of. Right.
Yeah. Bit problematic.
Yeah. So probably timing mattered too.
Yes.
If someone had already proved useful, the system sometimes, finds a way to explain what it previously declared impossible. And you know how to use a saber and you can ride a horse. Excellent. You can.
Excellent.
Yeah. So overlook this female stuff.
All very convenient.
Yes. Institutions are very good at discovering flexibility after the fact.
Oh, and then pretending they were flexible all along.
Of course.
That's how it works. So whether it's Edmonds seeking survival, Davies seeking her husband, Mulan stepping into a family duty, Barry seeking a profession, or Durova seeking a military life, the catalyst is, well, it's usually a closed door.
And disguise is the key that gets them through it.
Which brings us to the next problem. Getting through the door is the one thing. Staying inside, now that is something else entirely.
Before we go any further, today's episode is most definitely not brought to you by Passing Muster Tailors, regulation-looking uniforms for people the regulations weren't expecting.
Expertly stitched, historically flexible, and guaranteed to survive at least one suspicious glance from a sergeant major.
Oh man, I've had my fair share of those.
I know, yes.
Perfect for marching, sailing, scouting, and answering name and rank with great confidence and limited detail.
Passing muster tailors. If the uniform fits, maybe the paperwork is the problem.
Please disguise responsibly.
Excellent. Well done, sir. Let's talk about the infantry soldier lens here. How do you actually pass? Not just once, mind you, but every day.
Yeah.
Now, how does nobody notice that you aren't standing up? That's the big one.
I don't get it. Like, that's going to be really hard. And that's the thing. Passing is not just a single moment. It's continuous. Yeah. You have to pass the recruiting process, which, as we heard earlier, may not have been terribly rigorous in the case of the Buffalo Soldiers. Then the medical inspection, equally non-thorough. Then the barrack room, then drill, then fatigue duty, then sickness, then the march, then the field. And as you mentioned before, you got to go pee at some point.
And well, somehow it all seemed to work. And then let's not forget, you have to pass socially. In those days,
that's right.
There was a lot of social interaction. And the military is a world of habits. How people stand, how they swear, how they joke, how they complain, how they carry themselves.
How they scratch, how they adjust themselves, all these things.
All those things, yep.
And in our experience, soldiers notice everything. Not always the thing they're supposed to notice, but they do notice everything else.
No, there's a lot of grumbling that goes on, and that's, trademark, which means the guy, the troops are looking and listening and paying attention. So how do they miss stuff like this? A platoon might miss an order, but I'll absolutely notice if someone has a strange way of eating beans.
That's right. Exactly. And what makes these stories even more impressive, Cathay Williams enlisted in the 38th U.S. Infantry in 1866 under the name William Cathay. Very clever. But the source material says she passed a medical exam because at the time, the Army did not require a full in-depth physical, clearly.
Yeah, no.
Clearly no clothing was removed.
No. They just hold a mirror underneath the nose. Are you breathing? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, a little bit of fog. Good.
There's your horse. Go. So if you can stand, walk, and pull the trigger, hey, you were in.
Which sounds crude, but in a post-war army needing manpower and sending them off on shitty locations that nobody else wanted to volunteer for, that kind of minimal screening kind of makes sense.
Well, I believe the Russian army today is practicing the same standards. So.
They're a little more enthusiastic in their attraction methods.
Yeah, well, yes. But again, that's another podcast.
Here, get in the van. Get in the
van. Well, it also shows how much depended on appearances and assumptions. Now, if the person in front of the examiner appeared to fit the category, well, the system moved on.
Until later, when illness or repeated hospital visits forced closer attention.
Exactly. And then there's Frances Clayton, another Civil War soldier. The story in the provided script is that she was apparently above suspicion because she was skilled at, wait for it, drinking, cursing, and shooting.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
There you go.
Do the job.
That's the trifecta, right? Let's face it, in your time in the RMR, you knew a fair amount of people who were very skilled at drinking, cursing, and shooting.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes mostly skilled at the drinking and cursing part. All this is a very 19th century way of saying that she out-soldiered the soldiers around her.
Easily. However, we should be cautious of the details of Clayton's service and how much of that description comes from later retelling.
Yeah, that's a good point. But as a concept, it fits a broader pattern. Passing wasn't only physical, it was behavioral.
Yeah, you had to perform the expected masculinity of the group.
And in a military setting, that could mean being rough, loud, resilient, and uncomfortable with hardship.
Yeah, exactly.
Embracing the suck.
Embracing the suck, exactly. Or at least convincing enough that nobody wanted to ask more questions. So I suspect the grumbling is perhaps a little louder, the cursing is a little more, vocal. Things like that.
A little bit more bravado. Yeah.
A little more bravado.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sarah Edmonds, our fellow Canadian, took the idea of disguise even further. Her memoir and later story connect her with some spy work, and she allegedly used disguises within her disguise.
Brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Wigs, altered appearance, and even silver nitrate to darken her skin for missions into Confederate territory. That's all a part of the Edmonds story.
Yeah, silver nitrate. That's not terribly good for you long term.
Yes.
She did live to a relatively ripe old age, which is kind of surprising. But Edmonds' specific spy exploits should be handled carefully because memoirs, particularly when you're trying to sell a book, can exaggerate or reshape events. And she did have a book to promote, after all.
Well, she did. Everyone has to, make a living or something. And the reality shows weren't around at the time. So there we are. But even if we set the most dramatic claims aside, the psychological pressure is still astonishing. She was already living as Franklin Thompson. The idea of then adopting further disguises, crossing lines, and maintaining multiple layers of identity is almost hard to imagine. Although I can see her saying, they said, we need to get some intel from that Confederate position over there. It's near a market town. Be best to send in somebody who can dress up as a woman and pretend who's going to the market. I can see them saying, Sarah Edmonds saying, I'll do it.
But you're such a manly man. How could you ever pass as a woman?
Oh, let me try, Colonel. Let me try.
She had a ton of different personas that she had to keep track of, which is hard enough because most soldiers struggle to keep track of their rifle, their socks, or where they left their own mug.
Exactly. And yet here we have someone allegedly manning identity like a one-person intelligence bureau.
The pressure of that must have been immense.
Now, it wasn't just in the Army. The Navy and maritime examples add another layer because ships are even worse than barracks for privacy.
Yeah, because you're talking about, standing up to pee kind of thing. At least you can go behind a tree or walk behind a bush and pretend you're looking for some sort of privacy for whatever reason. But not on a ship, man. There's no trees.
No, what do you do?
On a ship, especially in the age of sail, everyone's living in a wooden world of hard labor, noise, cramped sleeping spaces, like with inches, like 2-3 inches apart from each other, and constant, heavy, laborious work.
So William Brown, whom we referred to earlier, is one of the strongest examples here. Brown served aboard HMS Queen Charlotte and is described as having risen to captain of the foretop.
Yeah, you're not just, choosing to do that. You have had to work your way up. You've had to prove yourself over and over again as highly reliable, and there was a pecking order, and only the most elite of them, the physically able, could actually work in the high rigging, because this is what it's all talking about, being physical. The foretopmen who worked high above the deck, like. You imagine you're up on the mast like that, and
terrifying.
This just, oh my God. They're setting and handling sails, often in brutal weather, like their hands are frozen. This is skilled, dangerous, exposed work, and there's no room for error, because one little slip, you're gonzo.
No. It's terrifying work, I would imagine. We do have to note that there are conflicting reports, though, on Brown's service. Ship's muster list says Brown joined in May 1815 and was discharged for, quote, being a female, unquote, just a month later. So she lasted a month, according to this report, right?
Right.
But the Times reported Brown had served for upwards of 11 years and described Brown as a smart, well-formed figure with considerable strength.
That contradiction is important. It shows how difficult these records can be. The official muster gives one version, and they may be trying to hide something, and the press gives another, and they may be trying to big something up. So both need to be handled with care.
Very interesting. It's very interesting indeed. But whichever version is correct, the core issue remains. Brown was discovered and discharged for, well, being a female.
Not, as far as the summary tells us, for being bad at the job.
Exactly. Now, the problem was the category.
Mary Lacey is another maritime example. She served under the name William Chandler and went to sea as a man before becoming a shipwright.
Wow. And that's another kind of professional crossing, not just going to sea for adventure, but entering a skilled maritime trade, because being a shipwright took years of training.
Yeah. Again, the theme is access. What could you do if the door was open? And what did you have to do if it was closed?
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the famous pirate cases, Anne Bonny and Mary Read.
I think you're supposed to say arg every time you say
arg.
There you go. I think it's a podcasting rule.
I think we have to do that.
Yeah, arg.
Arg. Maybe a bit more feeling.
A little more enthusiasm in our arg. There we go. We do have to be cautious here. These are famous names, but the best source guidance warns us not to oversimplify them as women who simply disguise themselves as men at all times. They weren't necessarily like the other ones that we were talking about, who were completely living out a double life.
No, they were quite different, actually. And as you rightly said, they weren't always in disguise. Anne Bonny and Mary Read should not be presented as straightforward women disguised as men, in the same way as Edmonds or Cathay Williams.
The more interesting point may be that at sea, clothing was practical. Yeah. A woman wearing male-coded seafaring clothes may not have always been disguised in a strict sense. She may have just simply been dressed for work, danger, and violence.
Yeah, which complicates the whole idea of disguise, really. Sometimes it is deception. Sometimes it is survival. And sometimes it's just clothing suited to the job.
That's right. And sometimes the line between those things is not always clean.
No, not at all. But either way, the complication remains privacy. In the infantry, we think that privacy barely exists. Well, at sea, it's essentially non-existent.
Keeping a secret in that environment for months or years is not just a personal trick. It's a logistical miracle.
Well, before we continue, Colin, I think this episode calls for something smooth, complicated, and operating under at least one assumed identity.
Which means today's Rum Ration Podcast episode is definitely not brought to you by borrowed name bourbon, aged under one name and served under another.
Smooth, smoky, and finished with notes of ink-stained enlistment forms and deeply confused adjutants.
Perfect for anyone whose service is real, even if the nominal role needed some editing.
Borrowed name bourbon. One bottle, two identities, no unnecessary questions.
Please enlist responsibly.
So, the change in these stories usually comes when the body can't keep the secret anymore.
That is a grim but accurate way to put it. Illness, Wounds were often where the private identity becomes institutional business.
So poor old Cathay Williams, she of the very clever name, contracted smallpox shortly after enlisting. Man, that's bad luck.
That's bad luck.
Happily, she survived, but the strain of disease, the heat in New Mexico, and years of marching eventually wore her down.
So she was hospitalized repeatedly, and eventually the post surgeon discovered that William Cathay was, hold on, Cathay Williams.
My goodness me. What I think is really interesting is that she was hospitalized repeatedly, and then eventually.
Eventually. We didn't say the level of care was that good. Yes, I noticed that too. Hospitalized repeatedly and eventually.
There are
finally someone actually looked at her.
Two words that really stand out there. Repeatedly and eventually. So the military could overlook a lot when she was standing in formation, but what it could not overlook was the truth once she was, well, again, repeatedly in hospital. Maybe it was just a cost to the system.
Maybe they thought she was a malingerer and they didn't want to encourage her, right?
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
Here's some Sepacol. Foot powder. But that's a recurring problem. The sick parade is dangerous if your identity depends on not being examined.
Well, Sarah Edmonds faced a similar fear. She caught malaria, but she knew that if she went to a military hospital, she would likely be discovered and would probably get some more foot powder, which she definitely didn't want.
More foot powder. So she left. No, what you said, malaria? Is that considered like a upper body injury? So that's Sepacol.
Respiratory. I think
that's definitely Sepacol. Yeah. So she left her unit to seek private treatment. But because she left the leave, she was, duly marked as a deserter. That meant she could never return to her regiment as Franklin Thompson.
And that's really such a tragic military choice. She chooses survival and secrecy, but loses her unit, her military identity, and her place among the comrades who knew her as Franklin.
And anyone who has served understands how painful that would be. A unit's not just an administrative posting. It becomes your world.
Yeah, your section, your platoon, your regiment, those are identities too. It's your family.
Exactly. So Edmonds wasn't just preserving one identity. She was losing another.
That's trauma of a whole different sort. The same kind of exposure appears in other stories, though. Christian Davies was discovered after being wounded in 1706.
Hannah Snell was also wounded during her service and later revealed herself publicly.
We should verify the specific wound details in each case before dramatizing them, though.
But the pattern is clear enough. War injures bodies, and once a body's injured, the secret becomes harder to protect. We've seen all the TV shows where, someone comes into the ER and they start cutting the clothing off to get at the wound. Well, whoops. That's when you're going to start seeing what kind of parts people have.
Yeah, things you didn't expect to see. Now, that's what gives these stories a very human tension. The disguise can survive courage. It can survive hardship. It can survive even suspicion. But fever, wounds, and surgeons they're a different matter altogether.
Yeah, because once discovery happens, the story changes, and sometimes completely.
Before discovery, the person may be a soldier, a sailor, comrade, scout, nurse, marine, cavalry trooper, or shipmate. After discovery, the institution often reclassifies the entire person.
The work remains the same. The service already happened, but suddenly the meaning changes because the system realizes the person was not supposed to be there.
Yeah. William Brown is a stark example. They were discharged for being a female.
That phrase is so blunt that today it sounds just like absurd.
Yeah.
Not discharged for cowardice or stealing anything, not discharged for incompetence, not discharged for a failure to perform, discharged for being female. It's like, okay.
It's crazy. That tells us that the institution's problem was not necessarily what Brown had done, but what Brown was.
There you go.
In terms of gender.
And Christian Davies was discovered after being wounded, but she remained connected to the army as a sutler. So that means they still had some respect for her, right? They didn't kick her out completely. So she was like a civilian who followed the troops and sold supplies. So she, made a living at this and turned a profit.
Yeah. So she ended up doing okay, I would think.
Yeah.
That is interesting because it shows a kind of compromise, right? I mean, which you don't always hear about. She would no longer remain in the same hidden soldier identity, but she did not entirely leave the military world.
That's right. She stayed near the army, That says something about attachment to the
Yeah.
life, to the people, and maybe to the identity she'd built.
Yeah, that's right. But then James Barrie gives us a very different kind of change because Barrie was not discovered during service.
Barry's my favorite. Barrie was notoriously bad-tempered and eccentric. Sounds like some people perhaps recording a podcast. The sources include the story that teasing about Barrie's high-pitched voice ended after Barrie challenged a man to a duel and shot him through the lung.
Ooh. Yes, James Barrie, again, born Margaret Ann Bulkley, was known to challenge people to duels. I mean, this seemed to be a regular thing. Like,
yes.
Excuse me, James, can you pass me the salt? Arr, damn your eyes. Duel. Pistols at dawn. Barrie was often teased by colleagues for having a high-pitched, squeaky voice. So be more, damn your eyes. Pistols at
high-pitched,
dawn.
squeaky voice, almost like a feminine voice, perhaps.
And they were generally considered a bad-tempered and eccentric individual. So not many friends, which could be helpful in this position. It is reported that Barrie challenged these tormentors to duels to stop the harassment. In one notable instance, Barrie shot a man dead through the lung, as you said. And guess what happened after that?
I love this line.
The teasing significantly decreased.
Yeah.
Decreased.
People got the message, don't fuck with Barrie. I imagine it did. I imagine the teasing did significantly decrease because the story fits a broader Barrie image. Prickly, defensive, brilliant, and not someone to be casually mocked.
No, and the interesting part is Barrie made it all the way to retirement as an inspector general. The secret only came out in 1865 when Barrie died of dysentery, and the maid laying out the body made the discovery. Probably all trying to steal the pants or something. You know? What's this?
Which is astonishing. Barrie's entire professional life had already happened. The army had accepted Barrie's authority, skill, rank, career. She'd been posted around the world, from South Africa to the Caribbean to Canada.
Yep. Only after death did the system learn the fact that would likely have barred the whole career at the beginning.
And that is a devastating indictment of the exclusion itself.
Yeah, because if Barrie could do the work for a lifetime and obviously do it very well, rising to the top and, probably saving many lives in the process.
And shooting a couple,
taking a few. It's all a balance, You got to look at the ledger sheets. But the exclusion was, again, as we've been banging on about here, the exclusion was never about ability.
No, you're right. It was about permission.
And after discovery comes the question of narrative. Who gets to tell the story?
Sarah Edmonds is one of the clearest examples because she wrote Nurse and Spy in the Union Army.
Subtle titles. She took control of her own narrative. She presented herself not simply as someone who had deceived the army, but as someone who had served. And I think that's important.
And yes, that distinction matters because the same facts can be framed as either fraud or as courage, depending on who tells the story.
Yeah, and Edmonds fought for her record. She had fellow soldiers testify for her and eventually received an honorable discharge and a government pension.
That's wild. That's pretty wild. Because she was also trying to evade desertion charges, right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And she also became the only female army of the Grand Army of the Republic.
Yes, that's right. So imagine that. The only female of the hundreds of thousands that served in the Grand Army of the Republic. There's only one.
Yeah.
But I wonder, would it be as Sarah Edmonds or would it be as John Franklin or the name that
Franklin Thompson?
Oh, Franklin Thompson. Sorry.
Franklin Thompson was a deserter, but Sarah Edmonds eventually forced recognition of
as Sarah Edmonds.
Yeah.
So it would be as Sarah Edmonds then. Yeah. Which is extraordinary.
Which makes her story not just one of disguise, but of a post-war justice of a kind.
Yeah, that's right. And Christian Davies' story also entered print, and Hannah Snell became publicly known after revealing herself.
And Nadezhda Durova wrote The Cavalry Maiden.
Good title. Good title.
Like that, which also shaped how her life and service were remembered.
But you know what, Colin? Memoirs are complicated. I mean, mine certainly is.
Yes, indeed.
So, and I read yours. I find a few points there I will not accept as fact, but they are valuable though because they preserve the voice and the experience, and they're also crafted documents, and it gives you a bit of insight as to how they themselves saw their roles.
Yes, soldiers, it turns out, occasionally improve a story in the retelling.
What? I am shocked.
Deeply shocking, I know. It's like you can't, doubting the fact that I invented penicillin in my memoir, which I find, almost shocking as a veteran telling a story in which the hill becomes steeper every year.
And the enemy more numerous.
Naturally.
So when we use memoirs like Edmonds or Durova's, we need to treat them carefully. They are evidence, of course, they are evidence, but they're also self-defense, reputation, performance, and sometimes myth-making. I mean, all memoirs are.
So you trying to tell me to not take every dramatic memoir episode at face value without corroboration?
Well, I'll leave that to your best judgment, Colin. And we know that your best judgment stands above normal best judgment.
Judgment's never been my strong suit.
Yes, I can attest to that. But, but we should not lose sight of the core. Even if some details are embellished, the central fact remains. These women entered the military or maritime life under male names and performed in roles the system claimed they could not occupy.
And the consequences of that service were not the same for everyone.
No.
The aftermath is where the real struggle for recognition begins, and Cathay Williams' story is one of the hardest.
Now, this is sad, She tried to get a disability pension in the late 1880s. By then, she had lost all her toes to diabetes.
Damn.
And
what a tough life she'd have, man.
Really tough. And then lurching around with a crutch. It was a hard scrabble life.
Even though there was precedent for female soldiers receiving pensions like Deborah Sampson, the doctor decided Williams did not qualify.
It's crazy. And she died shortly after being denied.
The bitter end for the only known female Buffalo soldier.
So another first, the only female Buffalo soldier of all the thousands that served. And it shows how recognition can fail even when service is documented. Williams had served. She had endured army life. She had lived the physical consequences. But the system still didn't grant her what she sought.
That's got to be one of the crueler parts of the story. The system can use people in the moment and then refuse to recognize them afterward.
Especially if they don't fit the preferred narrative.
Edmonds, by contrast, was eventually able to mobilize testimony, publish her account, and secure recognition.
Which shows that recognition is not only about what happened, it's also about who can prove it, who'll speak for you, who believes you, whether your story can be made acceptable to society hearing it. I mean, that's something that a certain somebody should have remembered when applying for a second BC Cross.
Yes. Well, we do have an episode all about that.
We do.
Yeah. Deborah Sampson is important here as an earlier example of a woman whose service eventually entered the recognized patriotic tradition.
Yeah. But William's story reminds us that race, class, gender, health, and poverty all shaped whether recognition was actually given.
Exactly. It's not enough to say some women were eventually celebrated.
Yeah.
We also have to ask who was not.
So William Brown's aftermath is another kind of consequence. After Brown was discovered in 1815, the story hit the press.
Amazingly, Brown went back to HMS Queen Charlotte and was able to collect prize money.
Excellent. But after 1816, Brown disappears from the records.
That disappearance matters. For many people on the margins of military and maritime history, the record only catches them during the scandal.
Exactly. The archive becomes interested when the category breaks. Before that, they're labor.
Yeah.
Afterwards, they're a curiosity. And then they vanish.
Which is why we have to be careful not to treat the surviving record as the full life.
No, we can't. It's only a small little segment of it. And there may have been years before, years after, relationships, work, poverty, pride, shame, or ordinary life that we simply cannot see.
And with women who served under men's names, the record is especially tricky. The name that appears in the military record most likely is not the one the person later used.
Yeah, exactly.
We saw the clever Cathay Williams becoming William Cathay. Or the person may vanish precisely because they resumed another identity.
These stories are often pushed to the margins. They're dismissed as embellished, comic, scandalous, or picaresque.
But as former infantry officers, we know that you do not accidentally become competent in a hard military job.
You do not accidentally become a cavalry captain like Nadezhda Durova.
You do not accidentally serve as a buffalo soldier.
And you most certainly do not accidentally become captain of the foretop.
No. You do not accidentally maintain a male military identity under the eyes of comrades, officers, surgeons, clerks, and camp followers unless you have discipline.
Yeah. Which brings us back to the central point. Their legacy is not that they trick people.
No, their legacy is that they did the job.
They were soldiers and sailors first.
Which I think we should note, because today's episode is definitely not brought to you by Bureaucrats Blind Eye Lager, the official beer of noticing a problem only after the job is done.
Crisp, refreshing, and brewed with just a hint of institutional embarrassment.
Perfect for moments when the system says impossible, while the soldier in question has already marched, fought, sailed, and carried the wounded.
Bureaucrats Blind Eye Lager. Competent enough to serve, incorrect enough to discharge.
I like that. Okay, so what do we do with these stories?
Well, I think we start by taking them, first of all, seriously.
Yeah.
They're not gimmicks. They're not gotcha stories. They're not simple tales of deception. They are military history.
Yeah, because they force us to ask what service actually means.
Yeah, is service the name on the muster roll? Is it the body the system expected? Or is it the work done, the danger endured, the comrades supported, the hardship shared?
Yeah, from an infantry point of view, the last one matters a lot.
Oh, yeah, it really does. Because when you're cold, wet, hungry, and scared, it's the person beside you that becomes real in a way that paperwork never does. I mean, they talk about, you fight for king and country and all that, but you're actually fighting for the guy right next to you. Or
that's right.
The person right next to you.
Yeah.
Guy or girl, yeah.
These women serve in worlds that were not designed for them. Certainly not open or friendly to them, and often not willing to recognize them afterwards.
And yet they entered those worlds anyway. And because we've bounced around from character to character a bit, I think a summary of each of these remarkable women will be, that's a good way to wrap up this episode of the Rum Ration.
I think that's a good call. So we'll start with Sarah Emma Edmonds, a.k.a. Franklin Thompson, born in New Brunswick, Canada in 1841. Sarah fled to Michigan in 1856 to escape an abusive father and a forced marriage. Let me do the math here. That's about 15 years old. Discovering that life was safer and more lucrative in disguise, she began living as a man to survive on her own. In 1861, so 20 years old, she was driven by duty and she enlisted in the 2nd Michigan Infantry as Franklin Flint Thompson. Flint, I like that.
Good name.
Serving as a male field nurse, she endured the mass casualties of the Maryland campaign, including the brutal Battle of Antietam. Edmonds is also alleged to have served as a Union spy, adopting further disguises from a Southern sympathizer named Charles Mayberry to an Irish peddler named Bridget O'Shea to infiltrate Confederate lines. So yes, you're right, going across as a woman and as a man. Though malaria eventually forced her to desert to avoid discovery in a military hospital. I kind of wonder about the convenience of that claim. Anyway, she later successfully petitioned Congress and successfully got it, an honorable discharge. She remains the only female member of the Grand Army of the Republic. Well done, Sarah Emma Edmonds.
New Brunswick's own Sarah Emma Edmonds. Yeah, remarkable. Cathay Williams as William Cathay. So Cathay Williams, she of the very clever name.
Very clever.
Well, her journey began in Independence, Missouri, where she was born into slavery in 1844. After Union forces occupied Jefferson City in 1861, she was designated as, quote, contraband, unquote, and served the infantry as a cook and washerwoman, witnessing the Red River Campaign under General Philip Sheridan. On November 15th, 1866, despite the prohibition against women, she enlisted in the U.S. Regular Army under the pseudonym William Cathay. Assigned to the 38th U.S. Infantry, she passed a cursory medical exam and served for nearly 2 years, becoming the only woman documented to serve as a Buffalo soldier during the Indian Wars. Her secret was eventually uncovered by a post surgeon after frequent hospitalizations for strain and smallpox. Though she was honorably discharged, her later years were marked by hardship. Despite her pioneering service, her application for a disability pension was denied shortly before her death in the early 1890s.
Man, talk about a tough life.
That was a tough life. Yeah.
So she would have been, I guess, in her early 50s when she died.
Yeah.
Then we have Mary Lacey, also known as William Chandler. And Mary is one of the notable figures from the Age of Sail who defied the strict male-only domain of the sea. In a world where women were not officially integrated into the Royal Navy as full sailors until 1993, Lacey adopted the identity of William Chandler to go to sea in disguise. So living and working alongside male sailors for months and even years without revealing her gender, she embodied the hidden heroine of the dockyards. While the total number of women who served under pseudonyms remains unclear, Lacey's career as chandler represents the lengths that ordinary women took to seek employment, escape personal turmoil, or find adventure in a maritime world that formerly excluded them. Her service highlights the physical endurance required to work on warships during the Age of Sail, where she maintained her secret while performing the same grueling duties as any other member of the crew.
Nadezhda Durova as Alexander Durov, the daughter of a Russian officer, chose a life of military service over traditional expectations when she dressed as a man to join the Russian army in 1806. Fighting under the name Alexander Durov, she served with such distinction that even after her gender became known, she was allowed to remain in service. She eventually rose to the rank of captain in the cavalry, serving through the intense hardships of the 1812 Russian campaign against Napoleon. Her memoirs, published in 1835, provide a rare soldier's perspective on the burning of Moscow and the confusion of the taking of the city. Durova's narrative captures the physical and emotional toll of the front lines, describing her efforts to find rest in broken village huts amidst retreating regiments and encroaching French forces. She served until her retirement in 1816, proving that competence and bravery could occasionally override the social prohibitions of the era.
And if you want to have an idea of what she looked like, the cover art for this episode has a painting of Nadezhda Durova in her full Russian cavalry uniform of the era. Then we have next Christian Davies, also a.k.a. Mother Ross. Christian Davies was also known originally as Kit Kavanagh, was an Irish-born soldier who enlisted in the British Army in 1693. And as we mentioned, her catalyst was for joining was deeply personal. She sought to find her husband, Richard Welsh, who clearly had turned off the location on his iPhone, and he'd been sent to the army in Flanders. Disguised as a man, she served with, quote, unparalleled courage, end quote, as both a foot soldier and a dragoon during the 9 Years' War and the War of Spanish Succession. After years of service, she was finally reunited with her husband following the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. Man, she served a long time, and her secret was only discovered in 1706 after she was wounded in action, but she remained also with the army as a sutler, selling supplies to the troops until 1712. Eventually becoming a pensioner of Chelsea Hospital. Wow. Her life story was recorded from her own mouth and published in 1740, cementing her legacy as a respected and well-loved veteran.
And that brings us to William Brown aboard HMS Queen Charlotte. William Brown is celebrated as the first known black woman to serve in the Royal Navy. Though her true name is lost to history, it is believed she joined the Navy around 1804 to escape a quarrel with her husband. For upwards of 11 years, she served aboard British warships, most notably on the 100-gun flagship HMS Queen Charlotte. Oh. Brown was no ordinary sailor. She rose to the rank of captain of the foretop, a position requiring immense strength and leadership. She led a team responsible for setting sails on a foremast over 100 feet high, working in all-weather conditions.
God damn.
Yeah. When her identity was discovered in 1815, her story became a press sensation, with the Times describing her as a well-formed figure of considerable strength. Remarkably, she was able to collect prize money for her service and return to the Queen Charlotte before disappearing from historical records after 1816.
And then we have our favorite ornery James Barry.
Yes.
Also, Margaret Ann Bulkley. Barry's life represents one of history's most enduring and successful deceptions.
Oh, yeah.
Originally born Margaret Ann Bulkley to an impoverished Irish family, she adopted a male identity in 1809 to study medicine at the University of Edinburgh, graduating at just 17. Wow. Well, the original plan was to practice as a woman in a liberated Venezuela. Whoops, a failed revolution there. Forced her to maintain her disguise, and she joined the British Army as a medical officer, embarking on a distinguished multi-decade career in South Africa, St. Helena, and the West Indies, eventually becoming the Inspector General of Military Hospitals in Canada. Barry was notoriously bad-tempered and a squeaky-voiced eccentric who once, as we mentioned, shot a man through the lung in a duel. to stop colleagues from teasing her, and he died. So a good way to encourager les autres. A brilliant surgeon who performed the first successful cesarean section.
Oh, there you go.
In 1826. Barry's true gender was only discovered after her death, as we said, by a maid, which you supposition that was probably looting the body. We say preparing the body.
Wow.
We also have the legendary figures too, like Mulan, and who reminds us that the idea of a woman stepping into a man's place in war is deeply rooted in human storytelling.
Yeah, some of these stories are cleanly documented, some are contested, some need careful verification, but together they reveal a pattern.
Women entered the ranks because the official door was closed.
And once inside, many proved that the official door had been closed for reasons that, well, had very little to do with ability.
And that's the part that stays with me.
Yeah, same here. The title is hidden in the ranks, but in many ways they were not hidden at all. They were right there, marching, sailing, nursing, scouting, fighting, working.
Hidden only because the system did not know how to see them.
Ooh, good line. Did you write that?
Well, I'm choosing to remember that I did.
That's very military of you.
Thank you.
Very systemic. And also, makes you wonder, so the system, they hid from the system, but their close colleagues who they were in the field with, who maybe grew to really respect them. Maybe some of them knew and chose to look the other way. Who knows?
That's right. And there's a final lesson here. It's that the uniform can conceal, but can also reveal. It can hide a name, but can also reveal courage.
Indeed. When you're looking at a military portrait, a muster roll, a naval record, or a memoir, it might do to look a little bit closer. You might be seeing a much bigger story than the one on the nameplate, because all these things can hide a secret, but you know what? It could also reveal true endurance.
That's right. And it can hide a woman from the system, but reveal a soldier to her comrades. Now, because I gave you a hard time in our last episode there, Rejoy, about not having enough RMR content, I've added a summary of a woman who served in the regiment, not disguised as a man, but someone who set the standard for future generations of female infanteers. Talking, of course, about Fabiola Joyce Camille, who is a pioneering figure in the history of the Royal Montreal Regiment. Who served from 1994 to 2008, and she made history in 1995 when she became the first woman in the regiment to qualify as an infanteer. In the book Glory Never Dies, on sale now at RoyalMontrealRegiment.com, Fab, who she known to her friends, Fab Camille identified herself as a triple minority, being a woman, black, and a francophone. And she recalled that some members were initially unsure what to make of her when she joined. But during her service, she attained the rank of sergeant. And Fab described the infantry course as the hardest experience of her life, physically and mentally, but noted that it forged unbreakable, lifelong bonds with those that she trained alongside. Driven by the belief that women can do anything men can do, she earned her place by focusing on the work and performing to standard. Her pioneering achievements helped break barriers for subsequent generations of women in combat roles within the RMR and the armed forces in general.
Well, thank you very much for that, Colin. Clearly a parallel attitude across the generations. Well, that's it for the Rum Ration, this episode for the Rum Ration podcast, folks. Please like, subscribe, and share with everyone who you think would enjoy this podcast.
Cheers to history.
Cheers to history.